So thanks for coming, everyone, and to everyone that will be watching. Tonight, we're just going to be talking about how to help rebuild confidence in injured athletes. And I like to preface it too, you don't necessarily have to be an athlete, but just someone that likes to enjoy being active. So getting started. A little bit about me. So I work with all different ages and ranges of people. My youngest has been 8 all the way up to adults. And then all different sports, like you name it, I've most likely worked with it. And then really any level too. Like I said, I mean, weekend warriors, people that kind of just do it randomly, and then people that are obviously like very serious about it. So my 2 main focuses are peak performance, and then obviously like the injury support. So why I got involved in the injury side of things was basically due to my first ACL injury when I was in grad school. I basically realized that there wasn't any mental support for injured athletes. And I mean, and at that time I was not an athlete myself, but like you don't really lose that mindset in a sense. And it was a struggle. So I basically ended up doing my thesis on creating a program to help injured athletes with their recovery and return to sport as well, because that was also challenging. So for me, I like to downhill ski and I mountain bike, and I'll probably using myself and then anyone else here that would like to share their experiences, but just so you kind of have like a reference to things. And then really this is an area that's underrepresented. And that is a big part of why I like to do these kind of outreach things, is so people understand and realize that you're not alone when you're going through this, and there are things that we can do to help, and just also a good understanding of the background of kind of like why this is happening. So basically, this is going to kind of be split in 2. I'm going to talk about, the psychological side of being injured and what that kind of entails, and then we'll get into like the confidence and some strategies and techniques and things like that. So I think a big thing that I hear from a lot of the injured people I work with is they're surprised that they just can't handle it themselves. They have that mentality like I can do anything, I can get through anything, I can fight through this. But then when certain things are taken from you, your mobility, your sport, it can be really challenging, and a lot of them can shut down, and we'll get into kind of what can happen in those various aspects. But again, it's not just their sport too. I mean, for a lot of like younger athletes, school can be affected, their friends, parents, just mobility, things like that. Like it's work. So there's a lot of areas that are affected, and I think it's important to remember that everything is intertwined. And then there's just the general lack of knowledge that what do injured athletes go through, and again, building more support around them. So next. And then, so here are just some quotes that you can read, but like I said, for me personally, I've had 2 ACLs and then multiple other knee surgeries. So I am pretty well versed in this. If anyone else would like to share their injuries or what,
Yeah, broken my ankle, partial Achilles tear, lots of concussions.
Did you have to have surgery for your Achilles, or did it heal?
No, actually.
Okay, that's good. I hear that Achilles is like a brutal.
I can't walk.
Yeah. Yeah, not the most fun thing. But yeah, so it's just, again, that recognition that you're not alone here, and everyone's experience is different, which I will touch on more throughout this. Okay. So I'm not going to go over this, but this is just a great representation of all the factors. I mean, there is a lot going on here, and this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the things that we can talk about and how there's personal factors, situational factors, and then like the behavioral, emotional responses. So there's just a lot that goes on in being injured. So. First thing, so the psychological. So cognitive appraisal, personality. So a big thing here is self-worth, identity, that can take a hit. It's how do they feel about themselves, and do they think that they have now changed because they cannot do the certain things that they want to do? And how does that affect them as a person? The loss of confidence, self-esteem. So again, I have multiple athletes right now that are on crutches. They're dependent on other people to do things. Everything's a challenge. Everything's a challenge. I mean, day to day, just getting up, going to school, going to work, preparing things, having to get, and there's obviously being on the crutches, but also then even like shoulder surgery type stuff when you're in a sling, getting dressed. Things can really take a hit when you're not being able to be independent like you were used to doing. So this is something that everyone has different levels, and I think too, it can vary through the process. So where, for example, a surgical procedure, you have the prep for the surgery, then you have post-surgery, and then you've got the whole return, like the physical therapy component, and then the return to sport. So things are not necessarily going to be consistent, and there's going to be variables, and I think it's very important to remember that you're going to have some good days and you're going to have some bad days, and that's completely normal. The fear of returning to sport is a big one. That for me I didn't think it was big till I got in the hill and I couldn't put my ski boot into my skis. My leg was just shaking so hard, and I was like, oh my goodness, okay, I'm having a very strong response that I wasn't expecting. So I worked through that. I had help getting in my ski boot. I had a plan for that day. I just kept it to one bunny hill run, and I was like, that's good. Made it down. We're gonna call it a day. An interesting component of this is the visual aspects. So for example, something that needs like a brace versus concussion. So I've worked with a lot of concussed athletes that sometimes feel that people don't believe them because there isn't a visual component. Oh, well, you're not wearing a brace. Oh, you're not doing this. People can't see what is going on in their head. So it's very hard when, teachers, friends are questioning, coaches are questioning them, and then you get into what we don't want of like pushing to return. So that's also a component of things to think about as well. Next. Emotional. So this is probably the hardest one for athletes because a lot of times athletes don't want to be emotional. They just like to keep everything in and don't want it to be out and exposed. But you're going to have emotions when it comes to this. You're going to have emotions at the initial injury, the potential diagnosis of the injury, and then that path forward and what that means for you and how that is going to affect your life. That is a lot of stuff going on. So frustration, anger, sadness are probably like the 2-3 most common emotions that people will experience because, again, we're dealing with a loss. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that when you are very active and you are engaged in something, when that's taken from you, it is a loss. And how do we work to replace that and to know that what you're feeling is valid and that there's ways that we can work through this. So other emotions that people have had going through the injury process.
I feel like I went through all of the stages of grief.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Denial, anger, frustration, sadness,
In like one day, like every day would be different.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that is so true. And that's a great reference, is basically going through this because it is grief.
Yep.
It's a loss.
Yeah, I think like the grief, and also I know mine had like an SI joint issue or something related to hypermobility, we think. So it was kind of like didn't really have a time frame. I'm constantly working on my core to not have it recur. So it's like I don't know if this is gonna get better. I feel kind of hopeless about this. Like, is this ever gonna get better? Am I ever gonna return to sport? You know, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
That is great, actually. Thank you for sharing that, because that is the unknown when you have, I would say, like more chronic issues that are going on. And I'm going through it with like my patellofemoral region. It's an ongoing issue that I'm gonna basically have to manage for a long time. And I think a lot of it too is just like figuring out a way to process that, okay, this really sucks. Like I'm gonna have to be doing this, but like it's also, if I want to do what I want, like what I love to do, like this is just part of the process for me. So it's kind of coming to that point of like, okay, I accept it. I don't have to love it, but like I accept it and we'll put the work in, because you know, and that's what you hope, right? That you see the benefit. But a lot of times it's the management of it, and the mental side is just like the physical side, right? And a lot of people, I'm sure you guys see it. I'm guilty of it. You do your exercises, you feel great, and then you stop doing your exercises, and then stuff starts coming back. Well, the mental side is the same thing. It's just a constant process that you're working on. But I also realize that we're all human, right? So we're gonna have those ups and downs, and how much we can put into the process and working through everything. So thank you for sharing. Sorry. So monitoring levels of negative affect. So this is just really important, speaking to people that are injured, but also potentially those injured caregivers, PTs, parents, friends. If people start sounding way more negative and way more down, that's a sign. Just, hey, check in to see what's going on. And that's just something like I like to have my athletes just, and I'm listening for, but also just having them be aware of, because obviously things build over time, and that can lead to signs of depression. And that's something that we would like to stay away from if possible. We realize that, hey, there's gonna be some of this, and that's completely normal, but it's also how do we move through it and past it when it does occur. And again, like I said before, this is gonna change, and some days are gonna be better than others, your energy, just your motivation, your drive, and there's gonna be those ups and downs. So I think kind of finding like what's normal for you, and I know especially with this, pain can be a big factor in the emotional response when you're in a lot of pain or pain has come back, that the sadness, the frustration, what am I doing wrong, the negative self-talk can come back. So that's where it's just, again, having that support, you know, physical therapist, whoever, just being able to say like, hey, this is coming back, like what can I do to move through this? So behavior, so these are basically your actions. So these a lot of times will stem from thoughts and feelings about your injury. So for example, this sucks, I really don't want to do this, is going to lead to maybe not being as adherent to your physical therapy program or the mental side of things, doing the work to help you feel like you're going to get better. So that's where it's just, we talk about the feelings, but then we try to have a productive way to move through them. Influenced by personal and social factors. So funny story. So I have a high schooler that I'm working with who just had surgery to remove a screw from her ankle, and she was still on crutches a week post-op. She was like, I'm not gonna wear them on school to Friday, or going to school on Friday. I'm like, okay. And she's like, I didn't love that idea, because what if it hurts? What if you start limping? All that stuff, what it aggravates? Well, I can't. And then so I recommended, well, can you bring them and leave them in the nurse's office or whatever? She's like, well, I can't not have them and then have them, because people are gonna be like, why do you have your crutches again? I'm like, okay. I mean, she was very, like, this was a hill that she was gonna stick on. So again, it's like trying to work through things, and that's where, again, the social factors, we try to be as best as we can with providing support, but also there's some variables there that we have to account for. Pushing too hard, I'm guilty of this, and I tend to overdo things, and that's something that when you tend to have these tendencies, it's something to be aware of and try to scale back actually a little bit more. and really adhere to what your program is. Because a lot of times what happens is it's just a vicious cycle. Push too hard, things flare up, now you're mad at yourself again, you're down, and then it's like you just kind of go through this process again. So figuring out, well, how can I tone things down so I still feel like I'm being productive? And then part of this, the PT adherence, so that's a big thing, making sure you're doing your exercises at home, you're putting that work in, depending on where you're at in your stages. Sometimes it can be very boring, but there's a reason why we're doing things. And even though maybe it doesn't feel as effective in the moment, we're working towards something, and that's what is the key to remember. So malingering is something just to kind of be aware of, a faking of symptoms to avoid practice or competition. And a lot of times this stems again from having that low confidence where people aren't as sure in, am I ready to come back? And that's just something to explore of why is this happening? What is your fear? How can we work through that fear to make sure that you feel as ready as possible? So I'm sure a lot of you are aware of like cognitive behavioral therapy or rational emotive behavior therapy. So it's what I base what I do on, it's think, feel, do. So how you think is going to affect how you feel, which is going to affect your actions. So I really focus on what you're saying to yourself fairly consistently to help build that feeling of like, I've got this, I'm ready. So when you go out into the world and you're ready to do things, you actually feel ready. So I touched on this a little bit. So social is really important for injured athletes. A lot of times people can feel if they're part of a team, maybe they don't want to go to practice or they don't want to be engaged as much because it's too hard. And I really try to encourage finding that support network again, maybe not going to all practices, but maybe trying to attend some. What can you do to help the team? Like, so you feel like you're participating in it and you're being active, but also just having those people, whether it's your parents, friends, significant other, that you can share what you're going through with, and that will have some understanding. And I think for me, this was when I first did my ACL, this was definitely a challenge because I didn't know anyone that went through it before, and no one really understood what I was going through and why 3 months after I would cry or be really sad. And it's like, why do you feel that way? It's like, well, because I'm either in pain or I can't do what I want to do. And it can be really challenging sometimes to find the people that can just listen to you. But I think it's really important to share what you need also with that support network. If you just need someone to listen while you word vomit out everything and cry, and they just are going to listen to you, great. If you want that response of like, okay, do you want to try to figure out how to make this better? Great. But sometimes people just need to get stuff out and cry, and that is okay because that's their way of processing things. So again, trying to be active. If you are able to do stuff too, like, if it's a shoulder thing, if you can get out and walk. If it is ACL, like even just getting on a bike in a gym and just feeling like I'm in a community again, like that stuff can help. Okay.
I went to my first spin class and didn't ride a normal ride, but just being in the room with other people was like the most exciting thing I could do. Like, I took it super easy, but just being around, kind of almost like back to felt like I was almost more back to normal.
Yep.
But just also being around people was
Yeah.
was really nice.
Because a lot of times, why do we do sports and why are we active? So we're around people. And some people don't, and I get that, and that's okay too. Some people just like to run alone and they don't want to run with people. But I think that feeling, that satisfaction, even though maybe, I'm not saying free, but like it was really hard to go because you're like, well, what if I'm not doing what I normally do and I'm not going as hard, but like I'm still here. And then that feeling of after, of that satisfaction, that proudness that you were like, I did it, and that was awesome. And that's what we move forward with. So just some key points to take away on this part is the fact that it will impact all areas of your life and don't necessarily be surprised by that. And then that the process is dynamic, is ever evolving, and life factors too are gonna have part of it. If your life is stressful and you are injured, like that can be also really hard. So lots of ups and downs, and we'll talk about ways to kind of help with that. But another thing so assessment tools can help. So this is like the measurements and things like that and like test results, but use your instincts as well. So if you're testing high, but certain things don't feel as good, listen to that. And that's a great communication to have with your PT of, well, things like, I know I'm, testing well here, but when I do this, like, I'm just not as confident with that, because that's the kind of stuff that's like little tweaks, especially as you get closer to returning to your sport, that it's like, okay, fine tuning how those things feel. And a lot of times I talk about ACL just because it's a personal thing, but I have another athlete I'm working with that is going through it, and she had a really challenging recovery. Her first PT wasn't great, and then she's in a great PT environment now, but it set her behind by many months, and she's just getting into jumping, and she did lateral haps for the first time, but she's like, yeah, the first couple were but then it's like the quad was there, and it's, it's just kind of like feeling that stuff. And again, it's this trusting the process, but also allowing yourself to be a little nervous too, but working through it. And that's where communication is going to be super helpful too. So something also I wanted to mention is being careful of comparisons. A lot of people will compare themselves. Well, they came back at 7 months. They came back, whatever. Well, you're not them, you're you, and everyone is different. And especially with injuries, everyone is different. And their experiences and your experiences, you can have shared experiences, but they're not gonna be exactly the same. So it's all about what is best for you, and that is your top priority. It's great to have knowledge of like, oh, well, someone came back here and someone did this and this seemed to help. How can I take that into my program? But again, some people do things that maybe aren't the smartest as well. So just being careful of that. All right. So now getting into the fun part. So kind of thinking about like how to build your confidence back. So for me, this starts basically right at the injury. It's best not to wait till after surgery. I mean, because you're a lot, or, depending on if it's non-surgical, having that kind of framework already in place will help a lot when you get back to the return component. So preparation, basically this is believing that you've done all that you can do, which is a question only you can answer, and be honest with yourself. Did I do everything that I could have done? And that, I will also say, goes back to like, was I smart? Did I do too much? So again, it's not just necessarily the actual physical components too. It can be the nutritional component, sleeping, just managing other things in your life. So there's a lot that goes into that. And really what we're looking at doing here is starting to build that foundation. That's how I look at it. We're building that foundation to get you back. So making sure like all these components, like you're putting the work in. It's like building a house. We're starting that foundation, building the base, and then we do the walls and the windows and all that fun stuff. But so preparation looks kind of different for everyone, but it's figuring out, all right, what do I feel like I need to do to start this process now? Self-talk. So this is the most important part of things, but this is also the hardest to change, and probably, as everyone knows, people are not great at their self-talk. Lots of negative self-talk, don'ts, can't, won't, failing, all of that stuff. The key is to think about what you want to happen. And I like to say, even if, yes, going to school is awful on crutches, but we can't not go to school. So how do we at least make it neutral? So it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm so excited to go to school. No, it can just be neutral. And that's what I try to get towards with some things. And I like to say, like, you can see I didn't necessarily say positive self-talk. I wanted to be productive self-talk. What am I going to do and how am I going to make that happen? And obviously you can tell yourself you're awesome and great on the side too. But that's where the belief's also going to come from, is being like, yeah, I'm going to put this hard work in. This is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm ready for it. That kind of self-talk. So this is a way that we like to monitor journaling, which will be on one of the next slides, but like just writing stuff down so you're more aware of what you're saying to yourself. Because a lot of times people just don't realize it. And all of a sudden they're having high anxiety or they're really angry. And normally it's not just it happened that day, there's a buildup of things. So that's what we want to try to work on. And then your focuses. So the keys here is stuff that's in your control. Just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean it's best for you or that it is in your control to do it. So what are things that you can actually do? Again, process, so actionable things, and then manageable. So remember, we're injured. We're not just full on here. Things have to be manageable. So they may feel smaller, not as significant, but they are. And that's really important to remember at the beginning, that this is a long journey, that your focuses need to be realistic to the process right now. Okay. So just some techniques to build confidence. So setting short-term goals and making them visual. Visual components are very helpful. I recommend you can put them on the wall somewhere, like Post-it notes, bathroom, bedroom, wherever, but just somewhere that you see them and that you can kind of jot down, like, here's what I'm working towards. And that goes into the big picture plan, right? So we know, okay, I will, and for me personally, like, my return is a year. It's like 12 months. It's not 8 months because I have a complex history. So I know, like, all right, I'm thinking 12 months down the road, but I'm not thinking that, right? I'm thinking month to month, day to day, like, what am I doing to help make sure that I feel ready? So writing those down, keeping track of them also just helps in the later stages when you can go back and be like, wow, look at all I've done. To have that documentation is really helpful. And then setting yourself up for success. So again, those realistic expectations. A lot of times people tend to set themselves up for failure. Oh, I can get back from this in like 3 weeks. And then all of a sudden it's 6 weeks and they feel like they failed. Very important to think about what's realistic for me here. And I always tend to go a little bit longer just because, like, then if they do come back, fantastic. But then if it is longer, it's like, okay, well, we knew, like, we can plan on this. This isn't a guarantee. And I think, as you all know, with injuries, nothing is guaranteed because the body is the human body and there's variables in there. So journaling, and this can be daily journaling, just kind of what your thoughts are, what your goals are for that day, what was your successes for that day. I think it's really important to focus on those achievements that you've had and keeping track of those. And what I like to recommend is like a shoebox or something where people can write down what they achieved, right? If you got a compliment from someone or you did something really well, put that in there. So then on those days that are not so good, you can kind of go through and read it. And that really helps remind you, okay, like, this isn't as bad as I feel right now. It kind of helps give that perspective. So, and then too, I think with this is it can kind of open your eyes too if you tend to have patterns, if you tend to have triggers with how, like, I know for me, pain, an increase of pain is a trigger for me. Or if I have something like is a bigger event, like a ski trip or something for me, like, am I ready? Like, am I gonna have pain? Like, what if my knee hurts? Like, and I'm just trying to kind of work through all that stuff, and I try to just kind of have contingency plans if it happens. So the visual notes, reminders. So this is also something that I recommend is like alarms in your phone. Like, if self-talk's a big thing, kind of remind yourself to check in throughout the day, or if you have like a specific saying that you want to put in there, just have that alarm go off like 3 times a day as your reminder, and that can be really helpful. Okay, so this is split into two parts, right? So we have the transition is the first part. So this is, again, kind of that later recovery. You're not fully cleared to participate, but you're getting there. So this is really thinking about, again, that foundation, everything that you've been doing, your PT, exercises, the mental work, that foundation should be pretty solid by now. The trust in the whatever injured body part it is. So how can we try to replicate in a safe environment what you're going to be doing? So you can start feeling that and be like, okay, like this is okay. My big thing is I don't want my athletes just to go back to practice 100%. Like they need to be doing some work outside of practice, one-on-one, by themselves. I also played soccer, so I just use soccer as a reference lot, but just doing some ball work, things like that. And then even if they can get some friends, which is great, just doing a little like touches with friends. Things like that you can be like, okay, I'm not fully in. This is especially depending on like the level that you're playing at, there can be some pressure to coming back. So we want to make it as successful and a positive experience as possible. Again, being prepared for ups and downs. As you start doing more work, things might flare up a little bit. That is completely normal. Again, your PT will be like, if it gets above a certain range or if the swelling lasts for more than 24 hours, like there are signs to kind of look out for. And that's always something that, it's just a good reminder that it's not going to be completely smooth journey. It's like you're not going to have any pain. Like that's not necessarily normal depending on the level of the injury. So just kind of knowing that, and also knowing like the feelings that you might be having, the anxiety, the nerves, the fears of coming back. Like, am I the same player that I was? Will I be at the same level? All of that stuff is completely normal. So it's just, again, thinking like when you have those thoughts, it's like, okay, I've put the work in. Then now we can kind of think about, all right, here's where I want to get back to. Like, how can I get back to that? Knowing when to push and when to back off, especially at this point, is very important. So really just listening to your body. Okay. So now we're at the full return to activity. You've been cleared, but maybe mentally you're not cleared yet. So hopefully we've done the work to really help you feel as prepared as possible, but there might be some hiccups, which is normal. So having a plan that you feel confident and comfortable with you is going to be key. So like I kind of said for myself, when I get back to skiing, it's like I go on the bunny hill for a run or two. Not the next day, normally the day after that, whatever it is, like, I mean, there's a lot of factors for myself. The weather, the snow conditions, like, just as much as I want to get out there and do it, I know I have to set myself up for success. So I will wait, quick side note story. So I went out like a few days after opening day. The snow was very firm and chattery, and my knee did not like that. So I basically had to take like a week off because it was really unhappy. So once I kind of got back, I was like, okay, I just slowed myself down and I was able to get back with some flare-ups, but then again, I worked through that and now I'm at a better part of like how I'm feeling. So I think that's also the reminder of the listening to yourself and having the variation and knowing that nothing is final either. Just because you have that pain doesn't mean you're gonna have it forever. And just because you feel a certain way today doesn't mean you're gonna feel that way tomorrow. And I don't know if I say this somewhere else, but I think what's so important to remember is this is a journey. This is a long journey and you're on this road, and it's just reminding yourself of like where you have been and where you're going towards, and hey, you've put the work in, and this is awesome that you're able to be back to where you are and you're still working through some things. So starting slow and safe to build each time. So again, that helps build that confidence, the patience component, and then the anxiety and nerves and doubts and all of that stuff. So kind of with the anxiety, nerves, doubts, worry part, that's where, again, the journaling, the writing stuff down, knowing what you have achieved is going to be key, and that trust in that part to know that, all right, I put the work in, it's solid. Everyone says it's solid. Like when I go and I do my exercises, everything looks good. Now it's just taking those next steps. So just to wrap up, so most athletes are not equipped to handle a loss like we kind of talked about. I mean, this is pretty much like akin to grief, the process of grief. So there's going to be a lot of different factors and emotions that you're probably not used to dealing with. And it's really important not to just ignore things. A lot of athletes will just try to ignore and push things down. That normally is not the most effective thing because it will come out eventually. And it's just, again, the level that it's going to come out. The injury can affect your whole life, not just your sport. So kind of taking that into account that there may be challenges there as well. And that goes into like the everything is intertwined. So when you're in pain, like you just may not be as fun to be around, or you may snap at people. And that's where also knowing like the social support aspect, that it's very important for the people not to get mad at you and know like where you're coming from, because there's going to be a lot going on inside. Ups and downs, celebrating all successes, keeping track of them. Again, that just helps with that feeling of growth and the confidence, and then having that solid informed plan, but there is some flexibility there. So I think that's super important going into an injury, that you kind of have a plan, but this isn't set in stone. There's could be some variation and some flexibility depending on how things go. And hey, obviously it could go longer, but it could go shorter. You never know. So yeah, all right. Questions? Does anyone, I have some questions from people, but does anyone have questions here? Nope? Okay. So we had some questions from someone that mailed them in. So I'm just gonna read the question and just kind of give my take on it. Strategies or suggestions for mantras or specific tasks to get my brain to move forward through the anxious thought. So I normally like to say like use a specific cue. So for example, if I'm on a head wall and it's steep and maybe a little bit icy, I get very nervous, but I also I try to tell myself, okay, first off, you know how to ski. Like you are like, I mean, it sounds silly, but like, you know what you're doing, you know how to ski, trust yourself. And then I normally go into like my pole plant, my body weight, like I have something specific that is actionable that I'm focused on. So that can help kind of move through that thought depending on what it is. So that would be my recommendation for that. If you have anything to add, since you kind of know, like.
No, I think that was probably the exact example.
Okay, perfect.
Standing on a head wall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like, you like freak out and you're like, and then it's like, okay, it's like breathing helps too, deep breaths, and just that reminder that you know what you're doing, if you know what you're doing. If you don't, you probably shouldn't be on the head wall in the first place. And that's, again, though, a great example of like set yourself up for success. Like just go to the green slope and build up to that. In a situation where I doubt myself and abilities in that terrain. So kind of what I just said, build up to it. If, for examples, it's moguls, like I don't ski moguls, but like if it's moguls or something like that, try to start either on a shorter section of moguls. If you're local and you ski at Stowe or something, like Gondolier has some like off the side of the trail right now. Pop in, pop out, right? Before committing to a full trail run of moguls, but also using the cues to guide yourself through it. So what it being like, so for me right now, specifically, I'm trying to remind myself to be more active with my feet. So like being quicker and being more like just that active kind of like movement. So that's what I would recommend for that. Also knowing how my brain works and will work against itself. I know that the feeling of anxiety is real, but that the threat is less than I'm making it out to be. I said, very real. It can feel very real when you're in the situation. So, and it can be very powerful, and that causes us to shut down. So having the strategy, so again, preparation. So you know what situations are triggering to you. So think about how you're going to manage and work through those situations on the hill. So if something does happen, how am I going to work through this? So using the cues, using the self-talk, setting yourself up for success. So those are some of the things that you can do. And then the last one is, what can my friends say to me when I tell them I am in my head about something? So depending on what it is, basically I always like to say, well, what do you want to happen in the moment? So if it's a fear thing, like, I hope I don't fall, or like not making a mistake, well, what do you want to happen? What do you want to do? So, and sometimes we get very stuck that we can't think about what we want to do. Like, I mean, I've had people that I've asked, I mean, this is a very straightforward example, but like, I hope I don't fall. Well, what's the opposite of falling? I don't know. Like, and it's just, because it's so powerful and can be so stuck. So it's like, okay, so staying up on my feet or staying up on the beam or whatever it is. Like, so that's where having a friend, because you aren't stuck. The friend's not stuck in it. So they can kind of help you get unstuck. And also too, like if you have something specific that you're working on, that can be something that would be helpful to share with them so they can help you get kind of unstuck. Other questions?
Is there stuff you can, if you're that friend, hypothetically speaking,
Hypothetically.
is there stuff that you should or shouldn't do as far as like encouraging them to go ahead and do it, or saying if you're not feeling comfortable, don't do it, or you know?
So my initial response would be a couple things. It'd be like how well you know the person and their recovery. Like if they're doing something that they probably should not be doing, that they're pushing a little bit too hard, I'd be like, hey, let's back off. Let's just go do this. But if it's something that you kind of know that they can handle, but they're just stuck, okay, how can we work through this? Do you want me to go first and you can follow me through it? We'll stop here and we'll check in. So kind of helping them work through it. But I think it is really dependent, like if you know the person and their journey well enough, and reading them too. Like if they're really, like if they're stuck and you can just tell they're really tense, like it's not worth it. Let's just do something else. Yep. And that's where, again, like they also need to know themselves well enough to be like, okay, I'm not, like, and it's not necessarily they're not ready for it. It's just maybe that day, like that moment, they're just not there right now because of whatever. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they didn't eat enough. Like, there could be other variables. So that's where being smart with your decision making also comes into play. So it's not really ever like a never ever. It's just not today, right? So there's always tomorrow, and we always want tomorrow. And that's where sometimes, like, for me, like, okay, I'm building back up, and it's like I feel good, but I'm like 5-6 runs in, like, okay, I should, as much as I want to keep going, I'm gonna call it a day because I want to keep skiing. So it's kind of learning that self-regulation component too.
In terms of like, I think you had mentioned too that like, in terms of emotional response, like pain is a really big, like for me it's the same way. I feel like I had several months of like chronic pain while dealing with this. I think which fortunately I'm out of it. I'm kind of like return to some activities in the same way, like kind of building things back up cautiously. I guess in terms of just like dealing with pain or chronic pain or something where you're like, I don't know if this is gonna like dealing with that mentally. I don't know if you had any tips. I feel like I found that the most challenging.
Yes. And so for me, like I go back to, I'm putting the work in, like I am trying, what I can, like I'm being smart, I'm doing my exercises. this is really hard. I think also addressing it and, not ignoring it, not being like, something's wrong with me. Like, why do I feel like this? It's like, it's 100% valid to feel like that because you just don't know. And that unknown is really hard where it's like, I can do all this work, but maybe it's just there. And it's like, okay, like this is part of my life now. And as hard as that is, like I also now have to kind of work towards accepting it. Like, yep, this is challenging. Some days are going to be worse than others. And you're going to hopefully have like good days and then not so good days. Like, but especially if it's like a string of like not good days, just again, like trying to figure out like what works for you to help manage the pain. I have a whole arsenal of stuff. I mean, I have the blood flow, like cuffs, like the restrictive cuffs. I have stim at home. I have TENS. Like I've got like I have like not Graston, but like kind of like a Graston thing. Like figuring out, well, this is the, these are the things that help at least. And then it's like, okay, well, do I need to kind of back off a little bit right now till it, and I think part of it is also just knowing like, yeah, this is hard. And it's okay to feel like this. And sometimes like even like setting an alarm, like or a timer, like 5-10 minutes of just, I'm gonna be really mad, or I'm gonna cry, or I'm gonna be, whatever is sad. But when that 10 minutes goes off, okay, how can I kind of like move forward? Because I think it's really important to feel that stuff and not just feel like, well, this is wrong or this is bad, like, because it's all part of it. And finding out, well, what are the next steps for me? And kind of figuring out like, how do I get it under control in a way that's manageable for me? Anything else?